free to stay off screen if you want to. And I'm going to share something for you. So the first thing I'm sharing with you is an image. It's a painting. You may have seen before. The question on the slide says, "What is this?" I'm not going to ask you that question because that's in some ways too easy. I want to ask you a different question, and I want you to think about your answer. I want you to answer this question. What does this mean? What does the painting mean? So you have a picture of a pipe. And hold on, that's too soon. That's too soon. You have a picture of a pipe, and the piece of writing here in French, which is part of the painting, in English says, "This is not a pipe. This is not a pipe." So the image and the sentence together, what does this mean, this work of art? Can you comment on its meaning? Okay, feel free to answer now.
This looks like a bullhorn.
A bullhorn?
Yeah.
Oh. No, it's not. It's a pipe.
Oh, it's a pipe.
But
For
of
smoking.
course,
For smoking. Yeah.
it said that this is not a pipe because this is a drawing. So so what the words mean is actually is meaning we are seeing something that drawing creates the image. So so that's more meaning of the. So if the painter write down the sentence like this is not a pipe, it create more meaning than more than the image of the drawing, because it's more like a philosophical question throwing back to the viewer when the writer say the words underneath the image of this, because we actually is looking at the paint. The actually is a paint, it's an image. It's actually is not a pipe because we can't smoke out of the images. So this is the whole interpretations or the intention the painters want to create, I think.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, that's very good. So you've got an image, a painting. The words are actually painted onto the painting. So the whole thing is the image. And so when I say, what does this image mean? Yes, I mean, I think you're expressing quite a lot there. It would be hard, if I said, write it in a couple of sentences. What do you think it means? And you could actually write a whole, 20-page essay on it. And I dare say people have, because it's a very famous painting. It's called The Treachery of Images by the Belgian surrealist René Magritte, done in 1929. Now, if you're given a title, that adds to the meaning, doesn't it? So The Treachery of Images. Treachery. What does the word treachery mean to you? Anybody? I'm just resharing it because somebody's just come in. So here's the image. The title is Treachery, The Treachery of Images. And Lucia gave us a reading of it, which is to say that the words contradict our impression of it as a painting, really. the average viewer of this painting wants to see a pipe. They say it's a pipe. And yet Magritte tells us that it's not a pipe. This is not a pipe. And so our brain has to do something different with it, doesn't it? We have to do something we don't normally do when we look at a painting. The title, The Treachery of Images, how would you interpret that in terms of the meaning of the word treachery? Which is a lovely word. Anybody know what it means? Treachery?
Like, I think it's something to do with killing someone or murdering someone.
It can be at its most extreme, yes.
Betrayal or trust?
Yeah, it's betrayal. It's betrayal, specifically betrayal. So when you betray somebody's trust, yes, that's perfect. And so if it is treachery, does that mean that we normally trust images? So if the painting didn't have the words "ceci ne pas un pipe," then we would just trust that that was a pipe. We would trust that the image represents what it seems to represent, or rather it is what it represents. And we forget that an image only represents an object. It isn't really a pipe. It is an image of a pipe. But we accept the image at face value for what it is. You know, whenever we look at a photograph or a painting, and indeed, which is my point, of course, when we read language, we are imagining that the little images on the page, you know, the little letters and the squiggly bits, actually are language, and we forget that they only represent language. And here, this, which is just oil paint on a canvas, represents a pipe, but it isn't a pipe. And that kind of sums up the meaning of this piece of work. It forces us to look at art, but not as art. It forces us to look beneath the surface at how art works. And I thought that was a nice metaphor, if you like, for what we have to do with language when we are doing the questions that we're looking at today. We're not just accepting the ideas and the images that the writer gives us. We're actually stopping ourselves from doing that and then saying, what does it mean? How and why does it mean that? What is the writer trying to achieve? And in asking those questions, we're doing something that language isn't really for. We're not really, you know, we're meant to just take the communication that's being given to us. We're not supposed to unpack it and try and understand it in that way. So you're absolutely right, Lucian, when you said that, Lucia, when you said it was a philosophical piece, because it's trying to make us think below the surface, but also above the meaning of what art is in itself at its most basic. Right, thank you for coming. This question, this session today, we're looking at language analysis. I call it language analysis. So we have two questions on both papers. Paper 1, it's question 2. On paper 2, it's question 3. And those questions ask you to comment on the writer's use of language. It is the same question twice. It's the only question that you have twice. So in some ways, it's a very important question. It also gets right to the very basis, the very root of what this curriculum's approach to English is. We're looking not just at the effective and efficient and interesting use of language for day-to-day purposes. We're actually asking you as students to be aware of how language works, and also to be able to unpick that and explain, or try to explain, how language works on a philosophical level. Yeah, okay. There is a difference between paper 1 and paper 2, the two questions, but we'll come to that later. The actual core, the actual basis of the questions is identical. So why do we analyze language? What's the point of analyzing language? Well, I'm just going to take a brief introduction from this gentleman. You know who he is? I'm guessing I'm looking for affirmation as you know who he is.
Yes. Oh, it's I think it's William Shakespeare.
It is, yeah. It's probably, that picture is probably William Shakespeare. Again, the treachery of images. At the time that this painting was painted, we don't know. We assume it is him. And for many years when I've been teaching, we didn't really know what Shakespeare looked like. But a lot of people say that that was a picture of him. I don't think he ever really posed for a picture. However, now there is a good clue to his to what he looks like, because on his grave in Stratford upon Avon churchyard, there is a carving, a sort of little statue, of, made out of wood of Shakespeare, and we now know that that was produced by a craftsman who actually knew William Shakespeare. He actually knew him personally, and so we can understand now that the image of Shakespeare on that thing that's been there for 400 years is actually quite accurate. And this idea of him having the big bald head and that is actually quite accurate. So that probably is Shakespeare. But again, the most accurate one is probably the little statue, little sculpture down on Stratford upon Avon, which makes him our local poet and playwright, but also, of course, the England's national writer. So why am I showing you Shakespeare? Well, he was a great craftsman and artist with language. But in his play Hamlet, he has a character called Hamlet, and another character comes up to him. He's a bit of a pest, and Hamlet is pretending to be a bit mad at that point, and he's walking around with a book, looking at the book, and this pest comes along and asks him, "What are you reading, my lord?" And Hamlet answers, "Words, words, words." Of course, it can be played in lots of different ways by lots of different actors over the centuries, but it's just on one level not a useful answer. If you ask somebody what they're reading, you don't want to hear him say words. Obviously, he's reading words. You want to know what the book is about, don't you? So the question, "What are you reading?" The most natural response would be to say, "Oh, it's a biography, or it's a story, or it's some poems." But Hamlet says he's reading words, words, words. And he's not wrong. Just like the painting that we looked at, literally what we look at when we are reading is words. And that's all we have in front of our eyes. Words and punctuation marks, that's all we have. That is what the written language is. And yet we tend not to think about the words. We think about what the words mean and the story they're a part of, the impression we get from it, the communication that the writer intended. But when we start to talk about language in the way we have to when we're doing the language questions, is we have to get right back to the words. We have to look at the words that the writer has put on the page for us and start to think about those and what they mean before we can start to comment on the bigger picture. You see why I started with a picture. And why do we analyze anything? Why are we sitting here on a Thursday afternoon discussing questions that are all about you having to analyze the way that somebody, maybe a long time ago, wrote stuff on a page? Why do we analyze anything? Well, does anybody know who this gentleman is? Anybody know who that head is? He's an old Greek, and he's Socrates, the philosopher. Now, Socrates, interestingly enough, never wrote anything down. So we don't have any writings from Socrates, even though he's one of the most famous philosophers of all time. But his pupil, Plato, did write down a lot of the stuff that he said. So it's one of these things where he went around talking to people and doing philosophy, and Plato wrote it down. So we have to trust that Plato wrote down stuff accurately, but that's not really the point. One of the things that Socrates said was, the unexamined life is not worth living. And he said this, 2,400 years ago. The unexamined life is not worth living for a man, he said. Now, we can lose the man bit and just say for a person, for a human being. So human life, the unexamined human life is not worth living, is what he said. And by that, I think he meant a distinction to animal life. It's what makes us human. Animals live their lives, they eat, they sleep, they do what animals do. We do all that stuff as well, but we also ask questions. And if we didn't ask questions, we would still just be running around in the fields. We'd still be dragging things into caves. There would be no science, there would be no literature, there would be no art, there'd be no philosophy. Because it was only by asking things, examining things, asking why, that we ever got anywhere. We used our most developed muscle, which is our brain. I know it's not a muscle, but you know what I mean. So you don't just go through life not looking at things and not asking questions. That isn't life in this definition. Human life is asking why. So that's what we're doing when we do language analysis. We're asking why. So what is language analysis? Getting closer back to the GCSE syllabus. Well, there are two things here. One is the right answer and the other one is the wrong answer. There are people who think it's about finding language features and then naming them. So it's hunt the simile, hunt the alliteration. That isn't actually what it is. It is not that. You can get a very high score on the language analysis questions without even mentioning language features, believe it or not. It is about explaining what a writer's words mean, how and why they mean that, and how that affects the reader. So there's three things to do. What do the writer's words mean? How and why they actually mean that, and how those words affect the reader. So it's not enough to say there's a simile. You have to explain what the words that make up the simile actually mean to you, and then explain how the simile actually works. It's a comparison. It's making a comparison between two things in order to give us an understanding. Explain how that comparison actually functions, and then say how the reader is affected by that. Are they amused? Are they happy? Are they sad, excited, whatever you want? So I'm just going to step out to have a look at what's going on. Jenny, did you want to say something? Was it unshared with you, Jenny? Hello, Jenny? Can't hear you. I'll share. Hello, Jenny. If you unmute, you can speak to me. No? Okay. I mean, you got your hand up. I can't answer a question if you don't speak to me. But I guess what you're asking is you can't see anything. Okay, that's fine because I didn't know you'd come into the class, so I shall unshare and share again. Okay. and hopefully that sorts it out. So I hope everybody now can see the slides. Please shout at me if you can't, because when I'm in the slides, I can't necessarily see what you're saying. That's okay, Jenny. I understand your microphone's not working, but hopefully now you can see the slides. Okay. So I'll stop sharing again. Share again. Here we go. There we go. So let's move on. So basically, the language analysis question is about explaining what the writer's words mean, how and why they mean that, and how those words affect the reader. So for an example, let's look at a very famous opening line from a novel. I use this this one a lot because I like it, and also because it's very simple. It doesn't actually contain any language feature as such. It's just a word that's interesting. So it's the opening lines to George Orwell's 1984, the famous dystopian novel about a future time, because it was written in 1940. It was published in 1949. A future time of where England has become a dictatorship, and all sorts of terrible things are happening. But this is the first line. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. It's a very familiar and a very famous line. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Now, how does that work as an opening line? If I was asking you about the language in there, what's the one word that really stands out? What's the one word that really stands out in that sentence? Or would have stood out to the readers opening the book?
13.
Striking 13, yes. Now, if it said striking 10, would that be as interesting?
No.
No. So it's not the word striking, is it? It's the word 13 that's the
13.
issue.
Yeah.
Because as you see on this watch or clock, our clocks, even now, don't go up to 13. They only go up to 12. So immediately people are going to think, what? The clocks were striking 13? But like the church clocks in English villages, and the clock on the mantelpiece, and the clock in the town hall, they're striking 13. What is going on here? It's a very small thing. It's just one word. And yet, interestingly, there is a lot to say about it, because Orwell could have used 15 or 20 or any of the 24-hour numbers after the 12. It would have meant the same. Clearly, you're in a universe in which everybody in Britain is using the 24-hour clock, presumably, and now they've changed all the churches and all the clocks and all the public spaces to go up further than 12. That's a big change culturally, and of course we haven't done that. Even now, we don't have those sorts of clocks around us. We have 24-hour time on our wristwatches if you're digital and so on, but we don't tend to change the old clock face. And it would be a really weird situation if we had. So it's flagging up to people that something major has changed in the culture of Britain by this wonderful future year of 1984. But
And
why? Go on.
13 is said unlucky number as well.
Mm.
Maybe it's make it more interesting.
That's good. Yeah, that's right. Because the question is why 13? Of all the numbers he could have used, why 13? And you're right. There are connotations with this word. So the word connotation simply means connections, or thoughts which are connected to something, links. A connotation of the word 13 has There are implicit meanings, hidden meanings in that word. There are links to other words. There are connections to ideas, images, and beliefs in that word. You might also, as an individual reader, have personal ideas, personal input into meanings. Not everybody's reaction to a word is the same, but most words, beyond the and a and you, most words have these connotations, these links and connections. Sometimes many links and connections, and some of them will be individual to you. Others will be cultural, and others still might be to do with, quite a large number of different approaches. So as you said, 13 is an unlucky number. Anything else about the word 13? Any other connections you can think of? Is it only unlucky? Okay, never mind. Let's have a look. So, first of all, in the context of that sentence, in the context of that novel, the idea that 13, that the clocks are striking 13, would have been strange. So it would have been a bit of a shock to the reader, a jolt. What, 13? I was quite happy with the rest of the sentence. Nice ordinary sentence. It was summer's day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. That's a bit of a shock at the end of the sentence. It's not a horrible shock, but it's a bit of a moment. Things aren't the same. It is an odd number, literally. It's not an even number, it's an odd number. And odd numbers are a bit spiky in comparison to even numbers. They can't be shared equally. Don't know what you want to say about that. It's an unlucky number in a lot of cultures, but specifically British culture, Western culture. 13 is connected to bad luck, especially Friday the 13th, which of course is the name of a whole slew of horror movies called, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on this and that. But Friday the 13th was a big horror franchise. Quite apart from its use in ordinary language, when we say, "Oh, Friday the 13th, better watch out," there's also this connection to horror. The horror of the horror films, which is given to us by Friday the 13th, and the violence inside those films. Finally, some people have tried to think why number 13 is an unlucky number, and one of the ideas that comes up with is this connection with the apostle Judas, the disciple of Jesus. He was at the Last Supper when Jesus sat with his disciples. He was the 13th disciple. He was the 13th man at that feast, because obviously Jesus plus 12 is 13. So he was the 13th. And of course, being the 13th, and he betrayed betrayed Jesus and led to his death. Therefore, we have this connection with the idea of betrayal. And actually, when you read the book, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but when you read the book, the theme of betrayal, of treachery, of betraying a friend or a lover, or indeed the entirety of mankind, that's a very, very deep theme in the story. And so actually, George Orwell is introducing his theme of betrayal, and also the elements of horror in the story, the oddness and strangeness of the story. All of that's being introduced to us in that first sentence. And it's all being introduced by just one word. And so you could write quite a lot about that word, number 13, if you were doing a question on that sentence. But you would never actually be asked to say, what language feature is it? Because it isn't. It isn't a special language feature. It's just the number 13. And yet you can fill a page with talking about it and the effects it has on the reader. Okay. Any questions about that so far? I've been talking in general terms, but I'm going to get down to the nitty-gritty soon. So many of you will have seen this before, but I'm going to go over again my magic bullet. I picked up this idea of magic bullet from a film made in the 1930s about a real-life man called Dr. Ehrlich, who actually created a cure for the terrible disease syphilis. And in the course of that, he was looking for a way of highlighting and getting straight to the disease. In order to kill the disease, he needed something very specific that was shaped in a way that would go through the body system and straight to where it was needed. And he called that a magic bullet. So I have my magic bullet. And my magic bullet is for language analysis. It's not a bullet, obviously. That's a metaphor. So I have just 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And those 4 points tell you what you need to do on the language analysis question. If only it was that easy, of course, but if you can just remember these 4 things. So you're asked a question, and obviously everything you do here has to be specific to that question, but we'll come back to that. So first of all, you look at the text, the little bit of text that the question asks you to study, and you find a quote. The quote must be appropriate to the question. So if you're asked, you're looking for language which describes the weather, you find a quote that describes the weather. So you found it. Now you do 3 things with it. You ask, what does it mean? That quote, those words. And then you say, why does it mean that? So you actually say what you think it means to you. But now you have to explain why you think it means that. How does it mean that? How do the words together on the page make it mean that? And then what is the effect on the reader of that piece of writing, of that particular phrase, or even just a word? And the marks, most of the marks come from this one and this one, the last 2. The easy bit is, what does it mean? Hopefully you've chosen a piece of writing, a piece of language that you do understand. And then, but saying why it means that is a lot more difficult. And then imagining what the effect of the reader is perhaps not as hard, but you still need to do it. Don't forget. And if you do that each time with each of the quotes that you use, then you should be producing little bits of writing on your answer that do everything you need to do to answer the question. Let's look at it in more detail. So, finding your quote. Well, the quote should be what I call juicy. That means it's packed with meaning. You could squeeze that meaning out, Don't choose a boring piece of language. There will be language in your question, in that bit that they've highlighted for you to do this question on. That is just nothing. It's just dull. Don't choose the dull stuff. Go for one of the really interesting bits. So you've got something to say. It seems obvious, but people will go for, the man walked down the road. What does it mean? You know, I'm not. I mean, we all know what it means, and it means it because it says so in straightforward language. There is nothing hidden there. There's nothing interesting to get out. You know. Okay, so choose something that's juicy, that's got lots of meaning in it. Now, a question for you: does it have a language feature? This quote. Because not all quotes are going to have language features, and not all quotes have to. As you've just seen, the number 13 isn't a language feature. You can just talk about the word. But you might choose a quote that's got a language feature or is a language feature. It might be a simile. It might be a metaphor. It might have an onomatopoeia word in it. It might, if it does, then mention it. You know, if it does, there are maybe 1 or 2 marks to get out of using your understanding of language features. And even the words that go with those language features. You can still get a very high mark on this question without talking about language features. But if one of your quotes has a language feature, so much the better. So how many, we'll say it now, how many quotes do you think you need to answer the question?
Two to three.
Yeah.
Two paragraph, 3 paragraph.
Yeah. I would prefer 3. I think three's the magic number. Yeah. So on AQA, your exam board, they ideally want you to have 3 examples, and that is in question 2, 3, and 4 on both papers. They're looking for 3. So remember that the magic number is 3. If you only do 2 and you do them really well, you can still get very high marks. But I would always err on the side, if you've got the time, do 3. Okay. So yes, 3. But you don't think that you can get extra marks by doing 4 or 5. You won't. They're looking to see that you can do this analysis, and having 3 examples will suffice to get you maximum marks. Okay. So yes, so you've chosen a quote. Does it have a language feature? If so, talk about that. By which I don't mean, this is a simile. If you say that something is a simile, you have to explain what that means. So it is a simile. It compares the raindrops in the river to the tinkling of a piano. You have to say what the simile is, because the sound of the piano keys is very similar to the plop 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 of the raindrops. You have to explain it. It's not enough simply to say simile. Okay. The most important thing then, after choosing it, well, whilst you're choosing your quote, do you understand the quote? If you do not understand the quote, even in the simplest level, if you don't know what it means, for God's sakes, don't use it. Choose another quote. There will be several of them. Even in that little bit of writing that they focused on, there will be several good, juicy quotes. Don't choose something you're scratching your head over. You haven't got time to worry about it, so choose something you understand. Keep the quote brief. All right? Don't make long quotations. I have seen people quote whole, half paragraphs or something. No, you're looking for a small example of language that you can talk about in detail. So you're going to try and say a lot about a little. I would say 4 words is maximum. Okay. You can go from anything from 1 word to 3 or 4 words. Try and keep it that small for each quote. But you're going to do 3 of them, but just for each quote, make them brief. It saves you time, and also you're not just including lots of other stuff. It's usually only going to be 1 or 2 words in that quote that you'll actually want to talk about. When you talk about the words that you've taken from the text, you must put those words inside quote marks, like I've done here, at the beginning and at the end, and both of them at the top, not one of them at the bottom. That is not English. But certainly you must put the quotes every time you use a word that you have taken from the text. Not just the first time, every time. And make sure that your quote actually answers the question. So if the question was, how does the writer use language to describe the sea, make sure that your quote is about the sea. If it's about something else, also do not use it. Okay? You're unlikely to get very good marks if you just write about language in general. Even if you do it really well. You might get a few marks, but you're not going to get the full load because you misread the question. Don't misread the question. Any questions so far on this? Good. Okay. So I've chosen a quote here. The question was, how does the writer use language to describe the fighting? So I'm talking about the soldier who's going in to do the fighting. The soldier roared into battle. It's a very simple sentence. Okay. The soldier roared into battle. So the first thing I've got to do with that is, what does it mean? A simple statement from me about what it means. This means, or the writer means, which way have you remember, you don't get any marks here for how you say it. You're not getting marks for writing it brilliantly and nicely. Just simply state things. This means, or the writer's saying, that the soldier went into battle like a wild animal, like a lion. He was brave and fierce and scary. All right, so that's me explaining what I think the soldier roared into battle means. Now, it's always a matter of opinion. Different things mean different things to people. You can take things in different ways. But whatever you do, if you explain why you think it means that, then they can't argue with you. You're explaining it, and if the explanation is reasonable, then you'll get the marks for it. So I'm saying it meant that the soldier went into battle like a wild animal, like a lion, perhaps. And that by that I mean he was brave and fierce and scary. I mean, is that fair enough as an explanation, do you think? I mean, you could say that he's making a lot of noise. He's shouting at the top of his head, or the soldier was trying to scare the enemy. There are different interpretations here, but that's the one I've chosen. And you have to follow the logic through the answer. So this means that the soldier went into battle like a wild animal, like a lion, fierce, brave, scary. But all I've done so far is explained what it means to me on the surface. I haven't done any analysis yet. So the next bit is, why does it mean that? The word roared is a sound associated with wild animals, especially big cats. So I'm now explaining why I think it's connected to this idea of being big and fierce and scary like a wild animal, by saying that the word roared itself has an association with wild animals, especially big cats like lions. Animals roar when they are angry or are attacking. So again, the violence of the action of running into battle becomes explicit there. Yeah. Going into battle is to attack an enemy and take part in war. I'm explaining the other bit of the quote now. So the soldier going into action is being compared to a lion attacking. Now, I've probably overdone it there. I probably said, it could be done quicker. You know, because you have to watch your time when you're doing an exam, and you have to get down to things quickly. And I've probably over explained, but you can see the point, hopefully, that I am looking at individual words inside the quote now. I've explained what the whole quote means. It means that he went into battle like a wild animal, being fierce and scary. But now I want to know why I got that meaning. Well, the word roared is the most important. And I've explained that the sound itself is associated with wild animals. And why animals roar. They roar when they're angry or attacking. And of course, that's what the soldier is doing. He's attacking. And then so he's going into battle to take part in war. And the soldier is being compared to a lion attacking. Now, there are other things I could have said here. Anything else I could have said about this phrase as we go along to get more marks? I could go on, but Bastoon.
Yeah, so Graham, I think you haven't mentioned that. What kind of language technique is that?
Yeah,
The word
yeah,
roar, maybe is a metaphor.
that's right. So yeah, it's metaphorical, because you're actually turning the soldier into an animal by making him roar. Now, we know that people can sort of roar, but we don't tend to call it that. We tend to call it shouting. Roaring is very specifically to do with animals, wild, vicious animals. So by using the word roared for a soldier, we're making a person into an animal in the metaphor. And so you can use the word metaphor. It's a specific type of metaphor, by the way, called zootropism. Zootropism, have you heard of that? You don't need these really specialized terms, but zootropism is where you use a comparison that turns a person into an animal. It's the opposite to personification. Yes. So when you turn an animal into a person in your metaphor, it's personification. But when you turn a person into an animal, it's zootropism. You're moving them, you're making them into an animal. So you could say that. There's another figure of speech that roared is, though, another technique. At the same time. Now, I said it's a sound associated with wild animals, but in terms of language feature, what could I say?
Onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia. Yeah, very good. Yes, because roar is really, it comes from a word that mimics the sound of what we call roaring. It just sounds like that, doesn't it? Roar. Yeah. And you could mention all those things in your answer. So this one, it just gives you a general trying to unpick why it means that. Along the way, you can just pop in it's onomatopoeia or whatever. And then finally, what is the effect? The effect on the reader. So people aren't usually said to be like wild animals. People aren't wild animals. So this will make the reader feel how savage and fierce the soldier is. That's one interpretation. You know, on one level, it's just how savage, fierce, scary he is as he goes into battle. And it's not just understanding how savage and fierce he is. It's meant to make the reader feel that, to experience that. You could even go back to the onomatopoeia. You can hear it. You can hear how savage and fierce he is. So those are an alternative reading. Could be, it may even be a criticism of the soldier or a criticism of war. It could be an anti-war type of statement. The fact that the soldier becomes animal-like when he goes into battle means that he's become inhuman, that the process of battle, the process of war itself, is dehumanizing in the mind of the writer. Now, these are our ideas, not necessarily the writer's ideas, because you can't ask the writer. And the examiners know that. You don't have to hedge this by saying, so I think the writer might have meant this or might have meant that. That's fine. You can just say, it could mean this, it could mean that. You're trying out different thoughts and different ideas. And that's what will get the marks. That's what the examiners want to see. They want to see you trying out this kind of textual analysis. They don't expect you to get it right all the time. What they want to see is you trying to get it, playing with it. The word they use in the mark scheme is attempt. They want to see good attempts at explaining the meanings inside the text. So the full thing, the full paragraph, and I know this is a bit of a big bulky paragraph and you could cut it down a bit, but the soldier roared into battle means that the soldier went into battle like a wild animal, like a lion. He was brave and fierce and scary. The word roared is a sound associated with wild animals, especially big cats. Animals roar when they are angry or are attacking. Going into battle is to attack an enemy and take part in war. A soldier going into action is being compared to the lion attacking. People are not usually said to be like wild animals, so this will make the reader feel how savage and fierce the soldier is. It may even be a criticism of the soldier that he has become inhuman. And that would be a very detailed, quite sophisticated analysis of the soldier roared into battle. So something which on the page is very simple needs quite a lot of explanation in order to get to allow us to understand the process by which it means that. The process that goes on in our brain in a second or less than a second, and that we don't even really think about, we just respond to. But we respond to it because of the connotations around the word roared. Any questions so far? Notice that some of the things that I said earlier, that the words which are in the quote have to be in commas, in inverted commas, or speech marks. So the soldier roared into battle was the quote. But the word roared is actually in the quote. And so again, when I talk about the word roared, I have to put it in quote marks. The reason for that is I'm not using that word as a word. I'm actually talking about that word as an object. Yeah. So that word, to signify that, we put it in quote marks. It's not just you're using the word like all the other words in your sentence. You're actually talking about that as if it were a little picture, as an object to point at. I'm talking about the word roared. And if you don't have those quotes, it makes it confusing. It also tells the examiner that you're not entirely sure what bits are text and what bits are explanation, what bits are yours and what bits are the writer's. Now, the next time I use quotes is around this word roar. Now, the word roar doesn't appear in the sentence, but it is part of the word roared. I've just taken, because I'm talking about animals roar when they are angry. And I want to just use that word as part of the explanation of what roared means. But because it is the first four letters of roared, again, I've taken it from the quote and therefore I put it in quote marks. Into battle is again part of the quote, so it needs to be in quote marks. And I then haven't used any of the words from the text in the rest of what I'm saying. So the job of work to answer the full question would now to be find two more quotes and do the same thing. Just the same process again. Okay. Any observations? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a questions for the paper 1 and 2 for the language questions. So both of them, like both questions, find 3 codes, or is it?
Yeah.
Because yeah, okay, but I remember it 8 marks. So it's 3 codes. Is that a bit too much, or no? Have to be at more than 2 codes.
Yes. Right. Now, so the examiners say, and this is from the examiners rather than from the detail of the exam. The people who actually mark the papers, they're looking for a 3. Look, if you do 2 really good analyses of quotes, you might well pick up the full marks if they're really good. But to be sure of getting high marks, you should probably try for 3 if you can.
Get it?
And I would say one of those quotes should have a language feature in it. The other 2 don't need to. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the difference between paper 1 and paper 2 is, as you say, it's worth 4 extra marks on paper 2. It's the same question, but it's worth 4 extra marks. And I will come back to that in a bit. But it is more about the depth of your answer, not about the number of quotes you've analysed. Okay?
Okay.
So still go for 3, but go further. Do more. Okay, but I'll come back to that.
Okay, get
So
it.
don't worry about it. At the moment, just choose 3 quotes on
So
both answers.
both paper, even paper 1, 3 codes. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. But if you've only got time for 2, because you're running out of time, do 2, but do them well. Everything's movable and everything's subordinate to running out of time. Anybody else before I move on a bit?
Yeah, Graham, sorry, I have a question, sir. In regards
Please
to in regards to why and how.
Yes.
For example, we can say what's that mean, and then when we come to the second part,
Yeah.
why does that mean and how does that mean?
Yes.
Is it for example same or?
Yeah, I think it depends on your approach. So if we go back to this one where it says, why does it mean that? And I think why and how here are quite close together. So it means it means that he's like a wild animal. He's scary and wild when he goes into the battle. It means that because this word roared has that connotation. It suggests wild animals to us. To make it absolutely simple. You use the word roared if you want to suggest that the soldier is like a wild animal. And why, so that's how it works. Why does that work? Because the roaring animal is associated with angry animals and attacking animals, big cats who are really fierce. And it's those parts of the animal that are being put onto the soldier. So the comparison in the metaphor or the zootropism is we're taking a big vicious animal when it's angry or it's attacking, and we're saying that that's what the soldier is like. So that is kind of both why and how it works. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else at this point before we move on, just to look at it? I mean, if you take nothing else away, take away the magic bullet. Yeah. Find your quote, say what it means, say why it means that, and then how that affects the reader. Do those 3 things with each of your 3 quotes to get the best chance of getting marks out of it. It also means you're not writing anything that's completely redundant or useless. These are the focuses. Okay. So we can have a look at another little bit of text here, and maybe you could do some thinking about this. So this is a small piece of text taken from a story called In Search of Olives. It's not a paper 1, it's a paper 2, because Carol Drinkwater is a travel writer. She also writes about food. And I think what she does is she goes to exotic places and searches out foods and recipes. But she tells the story about how she finds the foods and the recipes. But these are true things. She isn't making them up. But she does present, as you would expect, she does present it in a way that's interesting and nice to read, and she uses language very much like a novelist. There is no real difference between the text on paper 1 and paper 2. It's just the uses of the text. The language can just be as rich, and you should try and remember that when you're doing your writing on paper 1 and paper 2. So in this case, it's called In Search of Olives, and she's in the Mediterranean. So she is spending a night in the Sahara Desert. And so she's describing what that's like, the desert at night. And here are some lines. The density of night. The vast expanse of crystal stars glimmering in a flat black sky. Like a tarpaulin drawn over us. I loved the desert. Its immensity, its silence, save for the wind and the flicking of beasts' tails. So you can see what I mean about it being very rich language. It's very poetic. The imagery here is as powerful as that from a poem. And this is non-fiction, because she's just describing with her mind and her heart the experience of being out there in the night under the sky in the desert, for us readers sitting at home just looking at a book. Okay, so I want you to have a look at this, and I want you to see, well, I want you to choose one quote. The question would be, how does the writer use language to describe the night in the desert? How does the writer use language to describe the night in the desert? So you're describing night in the desert. So I want you, each one, can you choose a little quote, a small quote that you understand, that you think you could do an analysis on, in order to answer the question, how does the writer use language to describe the night in the desert? So when you found it, write it down in the chat. By the way, Lucia, that is exactly how you spelled zootropism. That's right. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the ones you've done. Bestoon, you chose like a tarpaulin. So what did you think the writer meant by that?
So we have to ask ourselves, what's that mean?
Yes.
First.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it means how the sky was like gray and them to raining a lot.
Yeah. So the
And
sky was grey or dark.
Gray and,
yeah.
Yeah, dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how does that work? Why does tarpaulin mean that?
Drown of us.
Hmm?
Now you have to answer the second part, which is how and why.
Yeah.
So like a tarpaulin drown of us. It's a bit hard, this one.
Yeah, it is a hard one. It's actually the example that I'm going to talk about, so I won't go into it too much here. But it's an interesting. You've chosen a good quote, but remember, you have to be able to express what you mean about it, which is the most difficult part of the exercise. So I'll come back to that one. Jenny, you went for crystal stars glimmering in a flat black sky. It's quite a long quote, and in fact, you could probably break it into two and talk about crystal stars glimmering separately and flat black sky separately, and then talk about them against each other, if you like. But tell me about the whole thing. What are you getting from it? Yeah, because I think Lucia also went for crystal stars glimmering. But you tell me what you meant by it, Jenny. I know you are, because you haven't got a microphone. Yeah. So you've also went into the word immensity. And yes, that is a really good word, the immensity. And so you said the reader is able to imagine the size of the desert. So immensity means largeness. Yeah. And so why not just say big? Why not just say large? And that would be a question that you'd want to answer. Why immensity? Because it's a very specific word, not one that we use a lot in ordinary everyday English. So the writer's chosen that very carefully. Lucia, you also went for crystal stars glimmering in a flat black sky, but you've actually written an analysis of it here, so that's really good. The writer used visual imagery to describe how a night of the desert looks. The use of crystal contrasts with flat black sky. That's right. In fact, crystal stars glimmering contrasts with flat black sky. So flatness and blackness is the opposite to crystal stars glimmering, because glimmering is shining out, is sort of moving in the sky almost. Crystal stars, it's a very, very bright and clear image, crystal stars glimmering. So you're right, contrast is what's happening there. Between the crystal stars glimmering and the flat black sky, you have a classical contrast between the flatness and blackness and the shininess of those words. Each of those three words is shiny. Crystal is shiny, stars are shiny, and glimmering means shiny. So you've actually basically just said shiny, shiny, shiny. How much more shiny can you get than shiny, shiny, shiny? You know? So it's the most shiny star display you've ever seen in the desert. And it's partly so shiny because of the flat blackness of the sky. That contrast makes it more shiny. Yeah. And you're right. It's the sky of the desert at night is very clear and without any cloud in it. Yeah. So we're able to see the stars easily, and the image is very impressive. Very good. There's some very good analysis there. Yeah. But again, the way that the glimmering and the crystal and the stars, those three words, actually, it's almost like a repetition of the same word, because they all have this meaning of shiny, glimmering, startling quality. And flat, in comparison, the word flat is boring. You know, it's almost like it's dull and characterless in comparison to the highlights of the crystal stars glimmering. You say contrast, and you probably should then describe why it's a contrast. It's I mean, it may seem obvious, but it's the contrast is the high glimmering shininess of crystal stars glimmering against the flatness and the blackness of the sky. That's where the contrast actually works and how it works. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yes, you do have an adjective. You've got two adjectives there, flat and black. But beyond calling it an adjective, you need to really bring it out, Parvan. It's more, what connotations does flat have? What connotation does black have? And I suppose the flat, just, you know, it is such a deflating, mediocre, dull word. Black isn't dull, but it has different connotations of emptiness, maybe, of no light escaping from it, and that's just the opposite of the glimmeringness of the thing. More on the tarpaulin, the night sky. So the stars look like raindrops on the tarpaulin. That's nice. I think anything where you're going to use tarpaulin, you're going to have to explain why tarpaulin. What does it mean and why? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Sorry to lose Jenny there. Yeah. So I'm going to go back into the and have a look at the text again. Thank you for all that. Some nice work done there. I've taken the like a tarpaulin again as well. And it is the flat black sky that is like a tarpaulin. It's the sky itself that she's talking about. And because it's like, it's a simile. So we're going to have to describe and understand that comparison. How is a tarpaulin like the flat black sky? Anybody like to tell me what a tarpaulin is? What is a
I think
tarpaulin?
tarpaulin is a piece of plastics, you know.
Yep.
To prevent like water or rains.
Yep.
Some like protective.
It's a protective covering.
Is
Yeah.
Covering.
waterproof clothes something?
Not clothes.
Or-
It's a big. It used to be actually a material coated with tar, you
Yeah.
know, molten oily substance, which was waterproof, like the stuff they put on the road. And you would put it over things you wanted to protect from the rain and the weather, temporarily, usually, maybe on a building site. Or if you maybe your roof had blown off, or you were having some work done to the tiles on your roof, that they would put a tarpaulin over it to stop the rain coming down into your house. Or if they've left some building materials by the side of the road, they often cover it up. These days, it tends to be blue plastic, and then they weight it down. And if it rains, it doesn't matter so much. So it's a protective covering used in industry and particularly building. So it's a rough and ready sort of material. It's an odd thing for her to have chosen, you know, because it doesn't tend to have connotations of comfort. It tends to be connotations of half-built buildings and roadworks and things like that. So it's an interesting word for her to choose, and that needs to be drawn out a bit. So let me have a look at what I did with tarpaulin and see what you think. So remember, it was, how does the writer use language to describe the night in the desert? Remember, we're finding the quote. What does it mean? Why does it mean that? How does that affect the reader? So this is what I've gone for. Again, it's overwritten, but I wanted to do that to draw everything out. So this is a simile describing how the writer feels about the night sky over the desert. Cozy, safe, and at home. Now that's what I'm saying. I don't know that the writer meant that. That's what I'm reading it as. And you have to be brave. You have to go out there and you say what you think it means. You know, the examiner isn't going to say, no, that's wrong. If you've actually used the evidence to prove you're right, they're going to say that's your interpretation and that's what they want to see. So first of all, in this simile, the sky is a tarpaulin, a protective cover which I associate with building sites and traditionally black in color. Yeah. That is drawn over them like a warm blanket. The words drawn over are most often used of bedding like sheets and duvets. And this gives a gentleness to the normally rough material of the tarpaulin. It becomes an image of comfort. The reader will understand that the desert at night is a place the author finds comfortable and can even love. So to follow it through from what I was saying, I first of all explain what I think it means. It's a simile describing how the writer feels about the night sky. Cozy, safe, and at home. It's a cozy image. It's a safe image. That's a little bit surprising because of the word tarpaulin, so I have to explain that. The sky is a tarpaulin, so I'm explaining how the simile works here. The tarpaulin is the sky or the night sky. And the tarpaulin is a protective cover which I associate with building sites. It is traditionally black in color. I could have said here, and of course, so is the night. So is the night sky. It is black, and that. But maybe I've just cut it down a little bit. That is drawn over them. So it's drawn over Carol and her team. And I'm talking about the words here drawn over as being like a warm blanket. Now, you draw over the covers. You draw the covers when you get into bed, or you draw over the duvet. And that is cozying down to go to sleep, isn't it? So like a warm blanket. So the tarpaulin has become like a warm blanket. Because we most often use the words drawn over of bedding like sheets and duvets, which gives a gentleness to the normally rough material of the tarpaulin. I felt I had to explain that because you wouldn't normally bed yourself down with a tarpaulin, not unless you were roughing it, you know, like you were homeless or something. And her image, her idea, the feeling that she's trying to give the reader about her relationship with the desert is not one of roughing it. It's not one of uncomfortable. It's actually the opposite. She actually finds it very comfortable and she loves the desert. So in a way, the tarpaulin reminds us of the roughness of sleeping out in the desert, but it turns it into a gentle image by talking about it being drawn over, which is more likely to be used of bedding like duvets. It becomes an image of comfort. That's my argument. That's my explanation for why I'm interpreting it this way. And then the effect. The reader will understand that the desert at night is a place the author finds comfortable and can even love. So I think that's what Carol was trying to get to us as readers by using that particular simile. There's lots more you could say, there's obviously a contrast between this idea of drawn over the comfort and the roughness of the tarpaulin, but I haven't used the word contrast. It's an image of comfort, and it's specific to do with the sky because of the black color, which I could have said like the blackness of the night. I should have said that. But of course, there's only so much time you've got, and this is already a very large paragraph just on those words, like a tarpaulin drawn over us. Any questions about that at the moment? So you can see the green bit is the what does it mean? The yellow bit is why does it mean that and how does it mean that? And then the blue bit is the how does that make the reader feel? What's the effect on the reader? So we can have a look at another piece of writing. This one is from the novel Jamaica Inn, an early 20th century novel by Daphne du Maurier. You've actually read this extract because it was in your original assessment, the assessment that you did for GCSE. That's where that came from. So the question in this case is the one you did in your assessment. So you're looking at the extract from lines 8 to 18 and saying, how does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the weather? You can include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques. And it also says sentence forms. Now, I have put sentence forms in red there because I would say to hell with sentence forms. Okay, you've got words, you've got phrases, you've got language features, you've got techniques. All of those things are to do with words. All of those things are to do with language. Sentence forms really aren't to do with language at all, and I have no idea why they're in the question. Now, that would be fine if it was just me saying it. You could ignore that and go ahead with what you want to say, and you can talk about sentence forms till the cows come home. However, it is the examiners, the chief examiner included, who at a conference said to teachers who were there, for goodness sakes, tell your learners not to talk about sentence forms. We don't want them to talk about sentence forms. Nobody can talk about sentence forms and make any sense of them. They just lose marks talking about sentence forms. Okay? So I'm telling you, and the examiners are telling you, ignore that bullet point. Talk about words, talk about phrases, talk about language features and techniques, but do not talk about sentence forms on your paper 1 question 2 or paper 2 question 3. You have been warned. Okay. There's you can spend a whole paragraph talking about, oh, we use a short sentence there and a long sentence there. I mean, okay, but there are very few marks to pick up for that. Wouldn't bother. Look at the language. It's all about language. Okay. So here's the text itself. And remember, the question is, how does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the weather? The wind came in gusts, at times shaking the coach as it travelled round the bend of the road. And in the exposed places on the high ground, it blew with such force that the whole body of the coach trembled and swayed, rocking between the high wheels like a drunken man. The driver, muffled in a greatcoat to his ears, bent almost double in his seat in a faint attempt to gain shelter from his own shoulders, while the dispirited horses plodded sullenly to his command, too broken by the wind and the rain to feel the whip that now and again cracked above their heads, while it swung between the numb fingers of the driver. The wheels of the coach creaked and groaned as they sank into the ruts of the road, and sometimes they flung up soft spattered mud against the windows, where it mingled with the constant driving rain, and whatever view there might have been of the countryside was hopelessly obscured. So 3 paragraphs of pure description, which of course is lovely for paper 1 creative writing. You have to write pure description. It's something really vivid images of this coach, the driver, and the horses in the horrible wind and rain of that evening. So again, you are looking for quotes that will help you answer the question. How does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the weather? So there's lots to choose from. Have a think about them. Which ones might you go for? What do you like the look of?
Rocking between the high wheels like a drunken man.
Right, so rocking between the high wheels like a drunken man. What is that describing?
Yes. Wheels are going like a drunken man, going not as smoothly going.
Yeah. So it's describing the way that the wheels are moving on the coach. So it's
a simile as well.
Yeah. So it's talking about the movement of the coach. And why are they swaying and rocking like that?
Because of the weather. It's a
Yeah.
very extreme weather.
And so specifically about the weather, which part of the weather is making it do that? It's not the rain.
Wind.
It's the wind. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to tease out of you the details that you'd need. So it is actually, talking. That's illustrating the way the wind is making the coach move. Yes. And so that's a good choice to use. Yeah. Is it a language feature?
Yes.
Okay, so what language feature is it?
It's a simile.
A simile. So it's got like, so like a drunken man. Yeah. So what is that telling us about the way this movement appears? You're completely right. I just want you to put it into words. So what is it about the drunken man that this swaying and rocking of the wheels is a good comparison? How do drunken men move?
Because I think it suggests normally drunken man, when they move, they are not stable.
Yep.
And the wind was so powerful, actually make the man actually not stable.
Yeah, I think
Walking
more than
straight.
unstable. If you watch a drunk walking down the road, drunken women as well, they go backwards and forwards across the pavement. They're kind of they're all over the place, aren't they? They can't go straight. They go this way and that way, and they sort of sway as if they're going to fall over. And so it's the precariousness, the backwards and forwardsness of a drunk walking along, that the coach looks like the drunken man moving. Yes, so it's not just the wheels that look like a drunken man. The second part of that sentence goes, the whole body of the coach trembled, swayed, rocking between the wheels like a drunken man. The wheels are what the coach is on. And it's between those wheels that the coach body is moving and swaying backwards and forwards. So when I said what is being likened to the drunken man, it's the actual coach itself, the whole coach. So the coach is weaving backwards and forwards across the road, looking like it's going to fall over, shaking as it goes along, and giving the impression that it is like a drunken man. That comparison, of course, gives a personification, if you like, or a partial personification. It's making the coach feel to the reader like it's alive, but it isn't. But it's maybe on some substance like it's drunk because it's waving around all over the place. But in this case, the substance isn't alcohol; it's the wind. It's the force of the weather that's doing that to the coach. And oftentimes, I don't know, when I'm out driving at night and I see some old guy coming back from the pub and he's wandering backwards and forwards, I think, oh God, I hope he doesn't fall off the pavement. I'm worried about him. I feel, that could fall over he could fall over at any time. And I think the reader is meant to feel that this poor little coach in the middle of this great storm is very, is in danger, is in some kind of trouble because of the wind, and that it might actually be pushed over completely, and then what would happen to the people inside. So all of that can come from those words. Yes, like a drunken man. That's good. That's very good. And that definitely is about the effects of the weather. Somebody else give me one. Somebody else got one?
I think,
Go on.
Yeah, I think coach creaked this onomatopoeia.
Yes. So, sorry, in the last paragraph there. Oh, by the way, if you look at that first paragraph, you'll notice it is all one sentence. It's only one sentence long. It starts with the wind and it ends with drunken man. And then look at the second paragraph, which is even longer. Is only one sentence long. And so is the third. That's just 3 sentences. That is a typical early 20th century or even late Victorian kind of writing. It's one of the main differences between modern writing and old-fashioned writing, that the sentences go on and on and on, using commas and using semicolons and so on sometimes, just saying a heck of a lot in one sentence. Anyway, the wheels of the coach creaked and groaned. Yes, because they're under so much pressure as they're being blown around. And it's also about the ruts in the road, isn't it? And the mud. And it's just the sheer effort of moving through that road at that time, with all the rain and this, that's been soaking the road and pouring down on the poor old coach. So, what were you saying about creaked and groaned, Festoon? Festoon, what were you saying about creaked and groaned?
Yeah, I think this is onomatopoeia. It actually suggests the power of the wind.
It does. So
and the pressure.
Yeah.
So the pressure on the wheels as well.
It's the pressure, isn't it? That's it. So people creak, and things creak when they are when they're under pressure, but they don't groan. So a coach can creak because any object, a mechanical object can creak. That is pure onomatopoeia. It's just giving you a sound image in your head of the pressure that the coach is under because of the wind and the movement through the mud. Groaned, however, it's onomatopoeia. It explains the sort of noise that you hear from the coaches, under the pressure, but it's a human noise, isn't it? Groaning is a human noise. So there's personification here again. The wheels of the coach are being personified because they're groaning as if they're in pain. So people in pain or under a lot of effort will groan, and the wheels are actually groaning out loud through the effort of sinking into the ruts on the road. And that makes it really a lovely audio image of the pressure that the weather is putting the coach under. I think that to get your full marks from the creaked and groaned bit, you'd have to explain why the wheels of the coach are making those noises, and that will take into effect that it's the wind, the movement of the wind that we've already been told about, the rocking backwards and forwards, but also these ruts on the road, and because it's the ruts on the road that makes the wheels really, are under a lot of pressure, because it's not like a smooth surface. They're getting stuck in these ruts and having to pull out of them and push through them. And that is to do with the weather. The weather have produced mud, and then other vehicles have been through the mud and produced the ruts, and that makes it even more difficult. Yeah. Yes, good. Because it's about, nobody has told me, like the wind came in gusts. Nobody's told me that, because that isn't an effect. There are a lot of words in here about weather, but why would it be wrong to use those bits of language where it's talking about the weather itself? Why would that not be answering the question? Look at the question. Look at the words in the question. How does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the weather? It is very important that you notice that word effects in this question. Because if you don't read it like that, if you just say to describe the weather, you might be talking about the wind came in gusts. But that's just describing the weather itself. Yeah, the constant driving rain, that's talking about how heavy the rain was. It's not talking about an effect of the weather. The effect of the weather must be on somebody or something. So the effect of the weather on the coach, the effect of the weather on the driver, the effect of the weather on the horses, that's an effect. How did the weather make them feel or make them change their movements? Or that's what this question is about. And so if you only talk about this describing the weather, you have answered a different question, and you won't get the marks you deserve. So make sure you read the question, underline the important words or circle the important words in that question. Make sure, yes, it will always be about how does the writer use language to describe, but make sure you understand what to describe what. Yeah. So answer the actual question. How does the writer use language? The effects. This is different to describing the weather. It is about describing the effect of the weather, and that is a consequence for somebody or something. That's just this question. Every question will be different. So you have to make sure that you understand exactly what thing you're being asked to find language that describes. Language that describes what? Please make sure you know before you attempt the question. Answer the actual question, not one that is in your mind, right? So I chose too broken by the wind and the rain to feel the whip. Now I would probably break this down and say too broken by the wind, and then refer to this bit in my answer, because actually it's the word broken that I really want to talk about. So here the writer tells the reader that the horses are so worn down and tired out by the wind and the rain to even care anymore about the driver's whip. She uses exaggeration or hyperbole to show the effect of the weather on the horses. They are not actually physically broken, but metaphorically they have been. It makes the reader understand how awful the effects of the weather are. I should have said for the horses. Yeah. So you see what's been done there. I've explained what it means. It means that the horses are so worn down and tired out to even care about the driver's whip anymore. So the effect of the weather is to just to take all the life out of them. They have not been snapped in half. They're not broken. We're using the word broken metaphorically. It means to have got them into a condition of tiredness and their nerves worn down, that they just don't care anymore. And the purpose is to make the reader understand or feel how awful the effects of the weather are. It's a snappy, short answer to the question on that one. Any questions on any of that? Now, we are aiming for people who are looking for a pass mark to be getting around the level 3 answers, 5 to 6 marks out of this 8 mark question. Obviously, for people looking for levels, 7, 8, 9, you're wanting to get your maximum marks. Paper 2, question 3, as we were going right back to the beginning, and what somebody mentioned way back then, is worth 12 marks. Paper 1, question 2 is worth 8 marks. So what are these extra 4 marks for? Well, if I answer like this, it's about, if this is a swimming pool and you can see that because the swimming pool is deeper here than it is here, the little girl and the lady look like they're on the same level. It's the same water, but here is deeper than here. And that's what we're really looking for. This is paper 1, question 2. This is paper 1, question 3. You need to go deeper. You need to go in for more detail. It isn't that you need more examples. Don't do 4 examples rather than 3. That's not the difference. The difference is making your explanations a little bit more detailed and a little bit more in depth, explaining them a little bit more. Okay. So if we remember what that one was, let's imagine it was on paper 2 instead, and see if I can make it deeper for you. So the blue ones are where I've added extra value. The horses are too broken by the wind and rain to feel the whip. Here, the writer tells the reader that the horses are so worn down and tired out by the wind and the rain to even care any more about the driver's whip. Being whipped is meant to be painful, and the fact that the horses no longer react to this pain shows just how extreme the effect of the weather has been on them. Now, this telling of the horses are too tired and and dispirited to even feel the whip anymore, but that doesn't explain why that's a particularly good example. Why that's what is it about being whipped? If somebody whips you, you feel it, but they are so tired and broken that they no longer even react to it. And so I've put that explanation in here. I can do that because I can give extra time to this question on paper 2, because it's worth 12 marks rather than 8. I'm going to spend 15 minutes on this rather than 10. So being whipped is painful. The fact they no longer feel the pain, it shows what the effect of the weather has been on them. And the effect is extreme. The writer uses exaggeration or hyperbole to show the effect of the weather on the horses. They are not actually physically broken, but metaphorically they have been. Now I want to explain what I mean by that. It's their spirits have been broken. It's not their physical bodies, it's their spirit that's been broken. It makes the reader understand how terrible the effects of the weather are. We can feel sympathy for the horses and imagine ourselves walking endlessly through that awful night. That gives a lot more extra value to the effect on the reader. Yeah. It's not just about understanding the terrible effects of the weather. It's about feeling sympathy for the horses, feeling sympathy for the people in the coach, feeling, thinking, what would I feel if I was that driver up there with numb fingers? That's the sort of detail you can go into. Doing that is always a good way of illustrating the effect on the reader, is to say, the reader can actually imagine it happening to them. Yeah. So that is a much fuller answer, much more approaching 12 than approaching 8. Again, it's overwritten. You probably don't have time to write that much and in that much detail. I understand that. And you can get marks by writing in more note form. You don't have to worry about it being complete sentences. You don't have to worry about grammar or punctuation or any of those things. Just get the answers down as fast as possible. Make your ideas clear. That's the main thing. Any questions? Any observations? Hopefully you understand the difference now between the 8 and the 12 marks. It's going deeper, saying more rather than more examples. And so finally, I take you back to my magic bullet. Just as a rule that you can take in there with you for doing question 3 or when you're doing your mock next week. What does it mean? Why does it mean that? How does it affect the reader? Just break your paragraphs. If you're writing paragraphs, just break your answer into 3 and try and do it 3 times. What does it mean in your own words? Why does it mean that? How does that affect the reader? And when you go to the why does it mean that, try and actually get into the individual words inside your quote. Don't make the quotes too long, but get into the quote and use that particular word means this to me. This particular word has this connotation. It makes the reader imagine something or hear something or feel something. And every bit of writing must have an effect on the reader. Don't overuse "it's interesting" or "it makes the reader want to read on." Just try and think a little bit more creatively. It makes the reader happy. It makes the reader laugh. It makes the reader feel anxious. Try and get a real effect out of what's been written there. Okay, so that's pretty much the end. Any more ideas? Any more questions about language analysis questions at all before we go? Yes, Lucia.
It's not about the language question. It's about the mock next week.
Oh yes, yeah.
So yeah, so we are taking like a paper 1 or paper 2, all 4 questions mock or.
Well, what I was told, I was covering one of the lessons with Emma this week. Certainly, Julie's class are doing a mock paper 2 next week.
Okay.
I just assumed that you all were. So, but I think you've done a level 1 full mock, haven't you? And
yeah.
Yeah. So this next one is a full level 2. Whenever you do it.
Okay. Thank you.
And it will be all 5 questions. Yeah, including the writing. Yeah. In proper time. So we need to see now just how close you are to passing the exam in real time.
Yeah, the timing. Time is feel like too short when I write down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody feels that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 hour 45 minutes isn't
Can't
isn't long.
finish in 1 hour 45 minutes and
Yeah.
whole paper.
So you need to be able to kind of cut down your time, decide which questions you think are worth spending a lot of time on, and where you're going to maximize your marks. So the first question, the true or false, is
Yeah.
very quick, 5 minutes, really, maximum. So actually, if you look at the paper, check the paper before you start reading your texts. You can usually see that question 1, the true or false, is only going to be about source A. So you can look, have your questions open, read source A, and as you get to the bits which answer the questions, you can underline them. And then you'll have read source A. There's no point in reading source B just to do question 1. So you can actually read source A, do question 1. Then if you look at question 3, the language question, that is only about one of the texts. It's usually, I say usually because it's not always, but it's usually about the other one. So if you've done source A for question 1, it'll usually be source B for question 3. Then you can read source B and do question 3. You can do your language analysis. Now you've read both sources. Now you can go back and do question 2, because that's about comparing them. And then you can do question 4, because that's about comparing them. And that's just a way of getting into the paper. I would recommend that, and the examiners say that's a perfectly valid way of doing it. So start with one source and do the questions, go to the other source and do that question, then bring them together. And by then you actually have read the sources quite thoroughly. Okay. Another thing to do is to think about your question 4.
Yeah.
How much time are you actually going to spend on it? The recommended time is 20 minutes or so.
10 minutes.
Yeah. If you are spending 20 minutes on your question 4 and getting 5 or 6 marks regularly, that sort of level, then perhaps you need to spend less time on question 4 and give that time to other questions where you've got more of a chance of gaining marks. It may be that question is just too complicated, and the examiners do have a bit of a thing where they said some learners ought to kind of think, maybe if in doubt, miss it out. I don't mean miss out the whole question completely. I think there are some really easy marks to get on question 4. Just on a very basic level, you just do a quick comparison between what are the points of view of writer A, what are the points of view of writer B, give a method that one of them uses, give a method the other one uses, and make sure you use quotes. You just go boom, 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 and do that. You should get the basic marks for it, and you can do that quite quickly. It comes with the where you're actually really explaining what the writers are thinking and feeling and doing. That is what bulks out the question to 16. But most of our learners are not going to get anywhere near 16. And you might think you spend 20 minutes, you could spend that better, particularly making sure your question 5, your piece of writing, is good. That's where you can really gain some marks. But if you're aiming for high grades, you have to do well on question 4. I'm just really saying you think about what you need and what you want. And if you're just looking for a pass, just think carefully about whether you want to spend a lot of time on question 4. That is one area when perhaps you can cut back some of the time. Another area is do not write too much on question 5. Remember, stick to 4 or 5 paragraphs. Don't write page after page after page after page. You won't get better for doing that. You want to plan very tightly and make sure you get a nice structure. That's more important than having page after page of writing that just goes off all over the place. Any other questions?
No, thank you. Thank you very much for your tips.
You're all right. Cool. If you do think of any questions, just drop us an email or talk to your tutor. Okay. So
Graham, sorry, one question, please.
Yes.
In regard to previous session, did you upload it on Covenant?
Did I do
the
what?
Previous session. So the previous session about the writing descriptions, I couldn't find it on Covenant.
All right, it is there now. I did it on Monday or Tuesday. So have
Okay.
another look, and if you still can't find it, I've put it right at the top, a new section right at the top of your CovLearn page, which says Dr. G's extra sessions 2024.
Okay.
If
All
they're
right.
not there, get back to me because they should be there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very
Okay
much.
then.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thanks for coming, guys,
Thank
and all the best for next week. And maybe I'll see you at on the Thursday evening for the next
Thank
one.
you.
Okay, but I'll
Yeah.
send out a reminder. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay,
Have a
thank you
great day.
very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
evening.
Bye.